Hello, this is David with Stupid Things Employers Do and what we can learn from them. And I'm here to tell you that if you can't hear, you can't drive. Nope, that is not what I'm here to tell you. In fact, that's kind of the whole problem that Big Bob's Trucks ran into when they refused to hire a deaf individual. See, contrary to unpopular belief, deaf people can in fact drive, if perhaps it's a little bit harder for them than it is for other people. And Trucker Bob, while hearing impaired, had done his homework. Now, what homework, you might say? Well, obviously you do use your ears to do stuff while you're, like listening for sirens, or someone might be honking at me while I wildly drift back and forth on the LA interstate, trying to decide which lane has the best vibes for my aligned chakras, which are in Mercury for some reason. But seriously, being deaf is no more an impairment to driving than being one of those astrology checks. And I'd argue it's less of an impairment, and the feds agree with me because they provide special waivers allowing deaf people to drive, even big rigs. I have just been informed that the feds allow astrology chicks to drive, and I mean, that's a decision, I guess. Anyway, back to Bob, who is allegedly not into astrology. Being deaf is dangerous for driving, yes, but so is talking on the phone, or having conversations, or listening to loud music, activities I have engaged in. And the trick is here that Trucker Bob actually had a valid commercial license. He had a federal waiver, and he had completed Big Bob's Trucks training program using an interpreter in the back seat. Being disabled will make many things harder for the disabled person, but that does not mean they don't deserve the same opportunities as a non-disabled person. Tragically, that is a memo which Big Bob's Trucks, which maybe I should call backwards Bob's Trucks, missed when their Vice President of Safety and Compliance asserted, "We can't hire you because of your deafness," and then ended the interview call. But I mean, he has a big boy title next to his big boy name. Surely the big boy boss Bob, and all truckers and truck-adjacent people are men named Bob for the purposes of this story, has the authority and discretion to make that decision. Yeah, sure, if he had done that. But discovery revealed that Big Boy, in fact, could not be bothered to do a threat assessment and merely asserted that all deaf drivers posed a direct threat to the road. Anyway, that doesn't fly so well. You can't just declare this to be and expect it to be, no matter how big and important your title is. Not when you're in front of a judge, anyway, because they will always be bigger than you while you are in that courtroom. So, Big Bob's Trucks lost a lot of money on this one. And to quickly return to that threat assessment, when a company wants to assert that a disabled person can't do a job, they can't just describe the disability, which is literally what Big Boy tried doing. They need to explain the consequence. So, for example, blind people can't see. Well, obviously, the consequence of not being able to see is you can't know when to turn or when to stop, so that's pretty dangerous. Not only did that not happen here, but the opposite did. Remember, Bob was already licensed as a trucker. He'd already gotten his waivers. So what does this mean for us? Well, I mean, we're not in court, and we're not stupid. So focusing on the fairly narrow, bro, you gotta explain yourself, while true, that's not really helpful. So, what can we learn? Well, I think my biggest takeaway here is what seems intuitive may not be reasonable. And here's why. I am going to place myself right under the bus with Big Boy Bob here. When I read this story, I was like, wait, what? Being deaf really is dangerous. Like, the number of times I've avoided an accident because I heard it coming, well, it's happened at least twice. But the point is, there's more details involved here than just being deaf. And while it might be generally true that deaf drivers are comparable to distracted drivers, they may not be specifically true for any deaf person. And also, we do allow distracted drivers to drive. And secondary to that, Bob was not comparable to a distracted driver. He did the hard work over and over again to overcome his disability, and he's probably a safer driver than I am. So what seemed intuitive to me and to Big Boy was not reasonable in context. So what can we do? I think the easiest takeaway here is educate your decision makers in the law. But that's actually probably not enough. Because even if you know the law, you can get things wrong when you make assumptions, like myself and Big Boy did regarding a deaf person. So I think this pushes it into a very specific form of educate your decision makers. They need to know the reason for the law. and the need to buy into that rationale, and the need to make sure their employment decisions don't just align with the letter of the law, but also the spirit of what the law intends. We don't need to be experts, but we do need to align our actions with our intentions, and our intentions with the law. That's all I've got for you today. I'll see you next time.